I'm Goldie. I'm an 11th grader at the Hewitt School in New York City.
I'm Susan Ruel, and I live in New York. I have lived all over the world as a journalist for United Press International, Associated Press, and many other. I've worked for the United Nations doing reporting for them. And currently, I'm the blood cancer editor for Medscape. I did serve as a journalism professor. I have a PhD in writing and literature, but most of my time has been spent in the field working.
Hi. Well, happy Friday, first off.
Thank you. Yes, my work day is almost over. How about you? Yeah. School's out?
School's done, but after this I have a basketball practice, so not quite done yet.
That's interesting. I was going to ask you if you had any other special interests such as sports, and it sounds like, yeah, you're into basketball.
Yeah, I also run the foreign language magazine at my school. So that's also, I love languages. I take French and Latin. It's one of my favorite.
Well, that was another one of my questions. Are there any other languages that you can speak?
So I don't speak either of them fluently, but I'm learning,
Great.
How about you? Like, what do you have special interests, a hobby?
Well, certainly with languages, I was really surprised to find out that despite many years of study of French and German in junior high school, and college, I never really thought that I had much facility for foreign languages. But when I got a Fulbright to go to live in West Africa, I was able to pick up the what they call a lingua franca, or local language, there very quickly. So that was a revelation. I guess it was the style of language education. And then when I moved on to work in China about a year later, I picked up Chinese, and my Chinese is probably my best foreign language. So all those years of French and German, they're helpful, but sometimes we find out what our real gifts are when we're plunged into the environment. And certainly it's important for international reporting. On the other hand, when you're doing professional journalistic interviews, such as I started to do very seriously when I was in China, I was actually teaching in a university, but I approached both wire services and offered to be a stringer in Shanghai. And my very first stories, I had to do them secretly as well, because it was really illegal to operate as a reporter at that time in China. But through networks of foreign friends and connections, I heard about a young student from Algeria who'd been injured in a race riot in Shanghai, and was able to visit him in the hospital and interview him. Now, why am I mentioning this? Well, because it's just an interesting way of telling you, how I got the job and how I operated, but also to let you know that, and I'm sure you're aware of this, when you're doing that type of reporting, you often have to rely on people whose language skills are at native capacity, because you wouldn't want to get anything wrong in the quotations and that sort of thing.
Even though I'm not 100% set, I think every day I'm thinking about, especially as a junior, like, what do I want to be? And often I find that journalism or some form of reporting, or like connections among like ideas and happenings in the world, that's important to me. And journalism is definitely one of the ways that I find, like, I love like the journalist writing classes in school and those sorts of clubs in school. And I think I would be lucky if I could pursue that as a career one day.
Nope. No. But you know what's funny, and I almost actually forgot about it for decades? I had a job writing a column for our city newspaper every week when I was 11 years old. And I did it for a year or two and got paid. It was school news, and one of the teachers gave me that assignment. It was nice. I had a social security number. I got paid. I still have the clips. But somehow I was so hell-bent on being a literary writer that even in high school, even in college, I went to Harvard. I did not go anywhere near the school newspapers, where I could have gotten some very good on-the-job training. I was just very focused on my interests, which were more literary. And when I was doing a master's in writing and literature in Indiana, I was walking around at Indiana University because I got a scholarship there and felt like a teaching fellowship. And as I was walking on campus, there was a kind of maybe disturbed or, somewhat mentally health challenged grad student who saw me and started yelling, "You should be out in the world. You should be a journalist." And I just thought, I kind of ignored that too. But many years later, I thought about, well, not that many, because it wasn't too much longer after that I started traveling. And really, once I lived in Africa and once I worked in China, I became much more interested in the political situation, people's lives. And plus, I wanted a job. I wanted to make money. I needed to survive and have a career. And that's how it all came to be. But I think the reason I'm telling you this is we just really never know. And a lot of these factors are out of our control, and we're discovering ourselves, as we go through life, and also discovering what's possible. For example, that was a job that I could get. And I was lucky enough to have a very helpful and just a good editor who was working with me in China, and I would have to secretly send him the reports like by personal letter because it was illegal.
Was that scary?
It should have scared me. But somehow I wasn't as careful as perhaps I should have been. I also felt very strongly about what I had read and was seeing with my own eyes about the society and the lack of freedom of expression, and the seeing some of people I knew disappearing week by week, and even their families didn't know where they were. They'd been seized and literally disappeared. This really got my my indignation going. I wanted to know the truth, and somehow I didn't get caught. Although one of my fellow graduate students was arrested and imprisoned for spying, unfairly actually. She was simply doing her PhD thesis. So in retrospect, I see that I took some chances. As that editor wrote in a recommendation letter later, he said, "You need a dash of dare to do what she did." And it worked out well, but it might very well have gone a different way, and I might not have had such a sympathetic and helpful editor. And actually, another thing I want to say is I'm really glad that you're getting this, this on-the-job training, which I sorely lacked. I had some, by reading newspapers and watching and reading the news, I had some idea of how to be a journalist, but I had never been trained. And it wasn't until I came back from China, my editor helped me get a job in San Francisco, and I went out there to work full-time, that the mostly older men who were the old-fashioned newspaper men and wire service reporters of United Press International, they are the ones who trained me on the job. And I ended up being a journalism professor for several years, but I was largely drawing on the lessons that I had learned on the job.
We had just gotten the theme for the News Decoder season, and it was healthcare. Mm-hmm. And we had also, in the Current Events Club, we had just attended a Roe v. Wade protest to protest for the keeping of Roe v. Wade, so it would against the overturning of it. And honestly, it was just a super impactful protest. Not that, just by virtue of being a protest, it was impactful. Like the number of bodies that were there, the chants, the unity that we saw. But it was this one was particularly important to me because somehow, it's kind of a fever dream, but we ended up at the front of the line, like leading the entire group. And a couple of us actually got the megaphone and were able to actually like provide a chant that the rest of the group would echo behind us. And
here in New York, was it?
Yeah, in New York.
So that gave you the idea of, hey, let's write about this topic.
Yeah, it honestly, because I had known that it had been going on, but just to be at the protest, it felt more real life. It felt more personal to me.
When we approach these assignments journalistically, we have to be very careful not to allow that to shape the language we use, no matter how well-founded and however factual our attitude is.
I've written many articles in my time at Hewitt, and I think I always find it a challenge. In my history class, we are always talking about bias and like what's the capital T truth. And what I've really realized is that there's not one. And bias is everywhere, and it is, honestly, I hate to say it, but it is so difficult not to write with bias present. But the way that I managed it was like you said, what are my sources? Checking myself, checking where I'm getting my information, and really making sure I'm trying my best at least to come from all sides, which is, I don't even know if I would consider all sides possible, but at least from the most two prevalent sides in this story. The professor we found actually online. We were doing research. We were checking out LinkedIn, and also we were looking. There were many websites of like mothers and people who are really close to the topic, and we thought that a professor would be probably ideal for this because they teach a class at a university of who knows how many individuals, who knows how diverse of individuals. Like, it's kind of their job to every day to speak from I hope as unbiased as a standpoint as possible.
But in this particular story, what happened is I have to confess, I shouldn't really do this as a journalist, but I too was doing some voter mobilization during the various elections we've had in the last 8 years or so. And I was in the car driving upstate to knock on voters' doors, and the partner or husband of one of the women who was with me was driving, and he was very quiet and driving along. It was a long drive, and all of a sudden, I don't know why, but he said something about, Roe v. Wade, that's probably had more impact on my life than anything else. And I thought, what? And like I said, I don't really like to question people, but I was really curious. And about 10 minutes later, I worked up my nerve, and I said, Len, why did you say that? And he said, oh, because I'm an obstetrician, I'm a and I'm an OBGYN. And when I started out practicing, that was the year before Roe v. Wade became the law of the land. And I was operating in Philadelphia, and I was seeing women coming in and they were bleeding to death. And we couldn't understand why the minute Roe v. Wade became the law, the cases tapered down. And on throughout his career, this doctor had practiced in Pennsylvania, down south, in New York, and he had seen all the many intricacies of women who, had really wanted to be mothers, but perhaps had a serious fetal abnormality in their unborn baby, and how he would take care of them. And he was literally I won't say distraught, but extremely upset. So I thought, wow, this doctor has seen it all right on the front lines. And I pretty much made that, made him the focus of my story. However, there's one thing that neither I nor you, Goldie, did in our stories about abortion. And I wonder if you know what I mean by that. There's the glaring statistic: 1 in 4 women in the United States probably has had an abortion. I think one weakness in my particular story, and perhaps in yours, was the need to find a source who could really speak to that personally. Obviously, they're all around us. We probably know lots of them. So sometimes there isn't time when you get an assignment to really delve, especially since the way the news business has changed in the years that I've been in it. With news, we used to say there's a deadline every minute in wire service reporting, and certainly that churn rate continues to accelerate. But if you can have the time and find the right sources, it really makes all the difference to emotionally, really capture the essence of a situation like that. So I would say that, that's part of what journalism really is. You get an assignment and you have to be knowledgeable and you have to check your own accuracy, but you're expected to write knowledgeably after doing the interviews and doing the work and learning and sounding confident. And this is extremely difficult and challenging, but you just never know. It's certainly worth trying. And as you do it more and more, you get better at it. And I guess there also are situations where you have to simply say, given the time allotted and the field, I might not be the best person for this.